plans have changed today. Like we always have these plans. You have things on your calendar, you have plans for the weekend, plans. Think you know what's going to happen the next day, and then any minute it can change. So this morning I woke up and we had some friends were coming. There's someone who's been part of this community for a long time, but we haven't seen him much lately. And he um, got in touch with us yesterday or the day before, whenever it was, and he had plans to come with his wife and his niece, and he was really excited about it because his niece is kind of new, very new to the Dhamma. It'll be her first Dhamma thing to come to, and you know. But then it was a text waiting for me that he sent at 2 a.m. His wife had a heart event. It's in the hospital. And, he said a big surprise. I mean, he's been a practitioner for a long time, so how big is the surprise? It's like we're never expecting or planning, but that's what's going to be the main event of the day. And so, all of these kinds of things, the really good reminders that even though we think we know what's going to come, what's going to happen, we really don't. And we're going to be doing some chanting, support for her. She's probably going to be fine for now. But like I said, it's a great reminder. But I had asked him, what he would like me to talk about when we were making these plans, and he said kindness. And I've been thinking about it, because of course we talk about kindness a lot. It's such a important important quality, important state of mind to have, an important way to interact with people, and never goes out of date, really pretty fundamental to our happiness. But it's interesting to reflect on different frames for kindness, different aspects, because one thing that's so important is our motivation, our intentions. If we're kind to someone because we want something, like maybe we want them to like us, or we want to get the job, or we want, something, it ruins it. I remember attending a huge event where the Dalai Lama came to San Jose, and it was this enormous conference center where we were. And he, the room was so huge that I could only see him. He was about this big up there on the stage, and the big monitors, to be able to see him. And he said if he does this, speaking to this huge crowd of people with any idea of gain in mind, it ruins it. And it reminds me of something that Ajahn Ganha was saying when we visited him this year. He said, be good just for the sake of goodness. Work just for the sake of work. Just keep precepts just for the sake of precepts. It's like, what does that mean? It's like we don't have any desire to get something out of it. It's not because we want something. If we do things because we want something, then if we get it right away, we want something else. We're never happy. We never find happiness that way. And if we give just for the sake of giving, we help just for the sake of helping, then we can be peaceful. He said, even find peace just for the sake of peace. It's really a beautiful teaching, a great reminder. Be kind for the sake of kindness. I don't know if you can feel that in your body. I can. I can feel the difference. Rather than that wanting something, even if it seems like something really wholesome. Like I can remember wanting to be accepted into a community so I could get ordained. But even that, it's even though it's a really wholesome thing to want, the wanting of it tarnishes the effort. So it's like our intentions are so important. And it's natural to as a human being to want things. This is kind of how we're designed. This is the conditioning we have, and we get a lot of messages in from all directions that we should want certain things. But when we really start to understand the nature of wanting and how endless it is, how completely unsatisfiable it is, um, then we step back. Wanting wealth, wanting notoriety, wanting health, wanting whatever it is, understandable, and stepping back and recognizing that being kind for the sake of kindness, working for the sake of work, finding peace for the sake of peace. This is what brings a kind of clear self-assurance that is so rich with equanimity, so filled with wisdom and stability. There's nothing stable in this world, nothing stable around us, no situation that's going to last, you know. But if we are grounded in these principles and this understanding, it's more than a principle. It's not like it's just a concept. It's about the direct experience, the direct experience of being kind for the sake of kindness. It completely leaves the sense of self out of it. Working for the sake of work. It's fun to work for the sake of work. Almost no matter what the job is, as long as it's wholesome, it's enjoyable if we're just there in the present moment, working for the sake of work. You do things because they're good to do. Feeling that. Like I said, it brings this kind of self-assurance. Last night, some people in the opening sharing referred to last night's sutta study. We looked at a sutta in the Sutta Nipada, in the first chapter. I think it's number 10, Alavaka. It's about this yaka that the Buddha visits. And in their exchange, the Buddha says that if you have four things, then you don't sorrow when you're passing away, dying. Anybody remember? He said, if you have truth, so truth was powerful. You know, it's more than not lying. It's really wanting to know what's really true, being dedicated to truth, finding the truth, knowing what's true about our own patterns and conditioning, about, you know, like what's really true. If we keep that in mind, that we really want to know the truth above our own personal preferences and, you know, our perceptions. So he said, if we have truth, then we have Dhamma, which is another way of talking about truth, knowing the way things are, the principles that are natural law, how things work. That in some ways, this life as a human being, conventional reality is an illusion. But to know the Dhamma, to have the Dhamma. And then the next one is Ditti in Pali. It's persistence or constancy, diligence. You know, that kind of putting forth and an energy that's very stable and determined, a determination. And the last one is Chaga, generosity. So truth, Dhamma, persistence, generosity. He said, if you have that, then you don't sorrow. You're not sad to die. It's worthy of reflection. Don't take this kind of thing into your heart and reflect on it and see if you think it's true. How does that work? And what does it mean to do what we do for the sake of the good in it, rather than for the sake of building up the sense of self? And it's really powerful to reflect in this way and to notice the difference in what's really going on in the mind. You know, what happens when we have some, maybe even pretty subtle desire behind our actions to gratify in some way this idea of me, my benefit. You know, it's a really helpful experience to feel the difference. And maybe we don't need to really be, you know, struggling with the idea of what does it mean to have a sense of self and what does it mean to get rid of the sense of self, but just in the moment of doing something kind for someone else. Can we feel when it doesn't have the stickiness of some subtle motivation for gain? It's really purely kind for the sake of kindness. And when we experience these things and we are aware, so this idea of being present, aware, watching, knowing, coming from that place of knowing, what is that? And really reflect on that. How does that come through in our experience? What does it mean to do this, take this action, say these words, or whatever else, from that place of really just for the benefit of everyone, for the sake of goodness. If we can, in the present moment, if we can see this difference, if we can let all of the extraneous perceptions, ideas, concepts, attitudes fall away, and just be with the experience directly, even beyond the words. Words are just more concepts. They can be helpful, I mean, it's extremely helpful to listen to the Dhamma. It's extremely helpful to be able to talk about the Dhamma. But then to go beyond that, to make use of it, to really put ourselves in that, kind of state of mind that's directly present, and observe and know when we're doing what's good for the sake of goodness, and we're doing it for some other reason. Are there something else lingering there that we want to identify? When we shine the light on our desires motivated by the sense of self, and they start to crumble. And to notice if we layer another kind of heaviness on top of it, like, oh, there I go again. I'm really not a very good practitioner. I'm whatever we're piling on top of it, just see that also and bring kindness, compassion for ourselves. When I was thinking about talking about kindness, I was thinking about this kindness for ourselves. When are we kind to ourselves? Sometimes it's acknowledging that we're really doing a pretty good job. Just by even being willing to see what our mind is really up to, it's already a really pretty good job. By being able to observe our patterns and resist following through on the destructive ways of talking and acting, just holding that back, that's a pretty good job already. It's like to be able to be kind to ourselves, to be able to see the things that we want to shift away from, see the things that we've been doing that have been, really guiding this whole process of our mind and speech and bodily actions, and in a wholesome direction, and acknowledge that, acknowledge what we've learned, acknowledge that we're changing, we're picking up the Dhamma and we're using it, no matter how many mistakes we make, just really putting attention on that progress. Then you can say, well, isn't that about wanting something? Are we training for the sake of training? Are we training for this? Are we being good for the sake of goodness? It's just all interesting ways of reflecting and recognizing that we can let go a little bit more, and to be encouraging ourselves. The Buddha really emphasized being able to reflect on our own virtue and remind ourselves of our own goodness. reflect on our generosity, our wisdom, all of these positive things. So we encourage the positive things in ourselves. And it's beautiful. It's like this, this brings about self-assurance. There's this word in Pali called visarada, and it's about being self-confident, self-assured. And in various places in the suttas, the Buddha talks about what brings that about in us. In one place, he talks about, well, if you live with the 5 precepts, you keep the precepts, then you have this self-assurance, this visarada. There's a calm stability in it. And then there's a place where he talks about the 10 wholesome things. So it's avoiding killing, avoiding stealing, not lying, not using sexual energy in a way that would harm anyone, including yourself, not lying, not using harsh speech, not using divisive speech, not giving, it's completely giving up nonsensical or frivolous speech, not longing. This is kind of related to what I've been saying about, goodness for the sake of goodness. It's not about getting something else, letting go of longing, letting go of ill will, and having right view. So if you have these 10 things and you have this self-assurance, if this is the way you're operating, this is what you're doing with your life, regardless of whatever else we're doing, whatever our training in terms of the world is, whatever education we have, whatever work we do, whatever we do for our enjoyment, whatever relationships we have, in some sense, that's all the stuff we're doing, while the real stuff that's going on is this development of the mind, development of the heart. How we're living, how we're keeping precepts, how we're relating to others and relating to work. And if we can have those 10 things operating in our life, he said, then you're self-assured. There's a solidity, calm, quiet, stability in us. Beautiful. And it's all related to awakening, because it's our finding peace for the sake of peace. It's really another way to think of total freedom, freedom from suffering, freedom from the tangle of desires and aversion. So do what you can to notice in daily life. Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why am I thinking about this? Do I want to keep thinking about this? Whatever it is. What if I were to die right now? Would I want to be caught dead thinking about this? Yeah, so I just want to offer this for your reflection, and a lot of along with a lot of gratitude for everyone's practice. For the good. Thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions? yeah, when I hear that, a lot of compassion comes up, it's like we can have compassion for the self fighting for itself. Yeah, and the relief that comes from stepping back and seeing that in context. It's like, oh, okay. I was thinking about Ajahn Gana. Um, yeah, I refer to him a lot, and we talk a lot about, these Kruba Ajahns that we feel very confident that they've taken the path all the way to the end. And, you know, and I was thinking about, well, why do I believe that about him? Well, first of all, I've been hearing about this from people I really trust for decades, talking about Ajahn Gunha and his experiences as a very young monk, having deep realizations and some of the things that have happened and some of the stories about him and then of course experiencing being with him and listening and then reflecting on what he says. And this is how faith develops. You don't just take it based on hearsay or um, you know that passage in the Buddha where the Buddha talks about don't believe something just because you're told that this is it or your teacher says it or you've read it in a book or it comes down through tradition or whatever. But to really investigate and to know for yourself. And you can never say 100%. I mean, maybe if I were an arahant, I would be able to know 100%. But I've even been told that's not necessarily sure for sure. But we can have a pretty good idea based on our experience. I was thinking about one of the stories about him. I can't remember if we were hearing this from a monk that was actually present, but maybe because the way the story goes is Ajahn Gunha and some other monks were sitting in meditation in the forest. And this cobra comes out and comes right in front of Ajahn Gunha and lifts up, and his head is facing Ajahn Gunha, just like right in front of him. And Ajahn Gunha opens his eyes and he reaches out and he pets the cobra on his head. And then the cobra comes down and he goes to the next monk and he raises up and this monk is like, I can't do that. Yeah. Anyway, the cobra eventually just went back off into, animals really can sense things about people. There was a cobra. This story is in Stillness Flowing. Ajahn Chah was walking for alms in the village and this cobra followed him. And then the cobra, in Thailand, there are a lot of these spirit houses. There was a spirit house right at the edge of the village, and the cobra went into the spirit house and waited for Ajahn Chah to come back to follow him back to the monastery. And then the villagers saw Ajahn Chah's footsteps and the tracks of the cobra, and they got really worried and upset. You brought a cobra to the village? It's like, I didn't bring a cobra. I was just following him. And then as the story goes, Ajahn Chah went out to that area. And he, in a very loud voice, said to the cobra, he called him Stumpy because his tail was kind of stumped off, must have had some kind of accident at some point. And he said, Stumpy, don't follow me. The people in the village are afraid of you, so don't come with me anymore. And he stopped following Ajahn Chah. But it's amazing. We think, oh, animals are, I don't know what we think about animals, but they might be a lot more sensitive and intelligent than we think. And anyhow, just by way of opening the mind to something beyond the material view of the way things work. Um, and trusting, knowing, trusting the heart.